Okay, hello everyone again. To introduce the session, we will be focusing on the November films of the Cinematic Spaces of Education Festivalette. This is our 9th edition of the Festivalette, which is part of the Comparative and International Education Society. And for those of you that maybe don't know the festival so well, it was started by Open Society Foundations. And the vision of the film festival is to push the boundaries around what questions and issues are the most important ones for the education field. We really feel that film has a crucial role in complementing other forms of understanding. And that is what we're very passionate about. And we love selecting these movies and sharing them. And to have the amazing honor and joy also to talk about them with the filmmaker is a great privilege. Thank you so much, Jenny Mackenzie, for joining us. Jenny is the director of the film The Right to Read. And in this session, we will focus on The Right to Read in the first part of the session. And then in the second part of the session, we will talk about the other film that we featured in November, which is Congo from Central African Republic. As you may have seen on the festival website, we decided to pair these two films together this month because of the way that they kind of illuminate this idea of the importance of learning to read, and also the struggles that so many communities face to be able to reach this basic educational necessity. So, we have more people joining us now. If you haven't shared where you're from yet, in the chat, please do post it. And we'd also love to know if you've seen the movies. So if you could put that in the chat as well, that would be great. And let's get started then with The Right to Read. And as you may know, this recently released acclaimed documentary basically exposes the literacy crisis in the USA and focuses on an activist, a teacher, and two families that really fight to try to improve the situation. So let's show the trailer. Let's introduce Jenny first.
Okay.
So Jenny is in Salt Lake City. She is associate professor of documentary film production at Utah Valley University. So she also has a PhD, like many of you joining us. And but she produces films that promote social change, and she has made quite a lot of movies that I'm looking forward to watching. Some of them I haven't seen, like Kick Like a Girl, about a girls' soccer team. Where's Herbie? Sugar Babies, about diabetes. The Opiate Generation, about the opioid crisis. And the Sundance and Emmy-Award winning movie Quiet Heroes, about the attention of AIDS patients within a Mormon community. So thank you so much again, Jenny, for joining us. And let's start with the trailer. Also, please do keep in mind that this will be a dialogue where we hope to hear from those joining us also. So please do prepare your reactions and questions to the movie if you'd like to participate.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Would you all confirm if you can see the screen? Yes? Okay.
Millions of American kids struggle to read.
Oops, excuse me. I'm just going to put it on. All right.
We should succeed in seeing that every 8-year-old can read independently. When I first started teaching in Oakland, there were only 2 kids in my class of 35 who could read. My man laughed. say this right now on tape. My man Larry just read his first sentence by himself, and I'm very, very proud of him.
We have a lot of people who struggle to read. Why aren't we screaming and yelling about this?
In 35 years, we have gone backwards, not forwards. It is a national problem that cuts across demographics, but it's painted as a minority issue.
For as long as I can ever remember, I've wanted to be a teacher. This school is the lowest performing in reading in the district.
So this is a civil rights issue. We're really trying to figure out how to get Oakland kids to read.
Reading is everything. That's the foundation to everything in this life. It has been said that illiteracy is one of the most solvable issues of our time. What letter is it? Yeah.
Everybody deserves the right to read. Literacy is for all.
We want to make sure that all students have the opportunity to be with a teacher who has learned the science of reading in order to crack the code of reading.
Question is today, do we have the political will and do we have the moral courage and fortitude to use literacy as a vehicle to include all? This is social justice.
Okay. Jenny, so this is really such a powerful, eye-opening documentary. And we were curious to find out more about how this project got started. I read a bit about it, but for everybody else to know what connected you to this subject.
You know, the amazing Ken Burns says that films find us, and that the right story and the right issue finds the right filmmaker. And I guess I sort of feel that way. I had a film at Sundance 5 years ago, and I was approached by a stakeholder, a funder, who was really interested in making a film about the early reading crisis. And as you know, in this business, it's rare that a funder approaches you. So you're kind of like, ah, there's money. Like, I'm all in if there's a little bit of money to develop a story. But really, I said yes immediately because reading is personal for me. And I grew up being that kid that didn't want to be called on in the classroom, that was a struggling reader, but that kind of flew a little bit under the radar. And I got really, really lucky because I had parents who were able to get me the resources and the support that I needed. And really, until making this film, I didn't realize what a privilege that was and how many others we really are leaving behind. So that was really the inception of the story. It took us over 4 years to make this film. And when you jump into a film about the early literacy crisis, you really have to find a way into that film. You know, a documentary is truly, I like to talk about it as being a compassion machine, you know, that brings us intimately into the lives of others. And so we were really, you know, starting to interview families around the country. We were very inspired by a remarkable podcast that I'm sure many of your listeners have tuned into, but it's Emily Hanford's podcast called Sold a Story, and it's her 5th podcast on early reading instruction. And so she had done her first one in 2018, and we interviewed her in the film. And she was really the inspiration to make it clear that this had to be about reading instruction and why we aren't teaching kids in this country to read, because that is like quintessential to a democracy functioning, is having an educated and illiterate populace. And if we can't vote, if we can't fill out healthcare applications, if we can't fill out job applications, you know, really, how do we, as the amazing Kareem Weaver, our protagonist, says, you know, we're in the information age and we can't access the information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, that was the inception. And then we really had to find an angle to the film.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Jenny, for those who are listening, you really frame this movie around civil rights, and you've just spoken about some of those connections, but could you speak a little bit more about that framing and And why that is an important angle as opposed to maybe other angles, as you say, that could address the literacy crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, being dyslexic, I didn't want to make a film about dyslexia, because Jamie Redford, who has passed away, but was a friend of mine and consulted on many of my other films, and he had made a wonderful film about dyslexia that was on HBO, and there was a couple of others that I had seen, and so I sort of felt like dyslexia had been done. And, we were in the middle of just sort of my team creating ideas, concepts, interviewing families, interviewing experts, figuring out what really this film was going to be about. And then we met Kareem Weaver, who is our lead protagonist. And he refers to himself as a foot soldier who is working hand in hand with the NAACP in Oakland to try to change early reading instruction in his own community and beyond. And, it was just like when you find someone who is this activist, who is so inspirational, who's living his life, in this remarkable way. And, you realize that this is very unique and special. And I think watching his work and watching him work with community partners and file this petition demanding change in his community, it was clear that this really his feeling that early literacy is our greatest civil right now that we have to fight for. And it became clear that that was going to be this thesis and the primary arc of the film. So it was really finding Kareem. And I think meeting him, the film became a process of deep collaboration with him. He found all of his archival materials and he became a producer of the film. Yeah. And I think for me, especially, where we are in this world with creating content, I was, very aware, I think always as a white woman, what it really meant to make a film with a lead protagonist who is a Black man who's working with the NAACP. And the families that we follow in the film, who are so remarkable, are also Black families. And I think one of the pieces that has been just so amazing in this journey of sharing this film is how much positive feedback we are receiving from the NAACP, from, so many people across the country who are saying, thank you, Kareem. Thank you, Sabby. Thank you, Jenny, for portraying Black families in this film, with dads. They're real families. They're real families. And the whole idea is they are like me. They are like any of us. And they are fighting for their children the way we all are. We want the next generation to have better opportunities, better access, and to really be able to soar. And have possibilities that are limitless to them.
Yeah, I was struck at how those families, how engaged they were and how loving they were. It actually made me feel a little bit negligent.
Well, they're being filmed. They're being filmed, so
they were just so wonderful.
They're portraying.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. But I wonder if you could speak to that as well. I mean, that role of the parents in the film is very striking.
They're so committed and
yeah, they really are. And they've been traveling around with us since February when we premiered at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. But I think, they are what our team refers to. They are just the real deal. And they are loving, they're compassionate, they are hardworking. The kids are front and center and they will do anything for their children. And I think it's really about uplifting the next generation.
Yeah.
And they care not just about their kids, but they care also about their communities, because that's what really engaging in a democracy is about. And that's what making a social justice documentary is about. So I mean, we developed relationships really via Zoom like this.
Yeah.
Because one family is now in Memphis and one family is in Virginia Beach. And so it's really, I think, the most critical thing about working with families and with subjects, at least from my point of view as a filmmaker, is developing a relationship that is authentic, that has trust, that has respect. You're breaking bread together. You're not just walking into their houses with a camera and, you know, extracting the story, but I think they are very much a part of this film, and they have deep ownership in the project and in what it is.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more question, and then maybe we'll open it up. But there's a sub-theme that's also really interesting as an educator, and that's the whole debate and discussion around literacy, and the whole debate around, or at least what you put a spotlight on, the lack of evidence-based practice in many of these classrooms.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about that and how that's explored in some of the hypotheses that you put on the table as to why there's such a gap between research and practice in this area in the United States?
Well, I think really it came from probably not bad intentions, but really our shift to whole language and balanced literacy came from a group of educators who really, I think, felt passionately about making reading and writing fun and immersing kids with literature, with opportunities to write, to be creative, and to be in a situation where there didn't have to be lots of what I think they refer to as drill and kill, which is really drill and skill. Reading is one of the, I mean, if you look at the hundreds and thousands of studies that are out there from brain scientists, from neuroscientists, it's one of the most challenging tasks, learning English, especially because it's a complicated language. But it's one of the most challenging tasks that the brain has to accomplish. And so really the idea of memorization and cueing really is something that is a real challenge for many, many children who will not, you know, who need lots of real repetition and scaffolding and explicit instruction that is built step by step by step. So we moved away, I think, probably unintentionally in a sort of innocent way from phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, blending, and in this sort of full whole language immersion. And then we just sort of got into the trap where we get into in many countries where we prioritized politics and really profit over children's outcomes. And we saw the declining of reading rates, and we said, well, why aren't we doing anything about this? And, you know, ignorance is kind of bliss, right? Turn your head and don't look. And it's really Emily Hanford, who's an amazing investigative journalist, who her first podcast said, we have to expose this. And then Kareem's journey was the perfect way to expose this.
Let's open it up for other questions. We have Rebecca, we have Hugh. I'm sure Adriana has more questions. Also comments, or
I'm gonna wait until to see if others want to speak.
You could also share what the movie moved in you.
I can go.
Please.
Jenny, I love the movie, and I'd love to get into the big education discussions because there's so much there. But I was just struck by you said how important the relationships were. How long did it take you to make the movie, and how did you build those relationships before and after? What's the contact with people now? People how people using the film as far as you know, but I'll just be interested to know what you what your journey was there.
Yeah. We probably met the Adams Staples family and the Hunter family. I'm thinking it was probably 2 or 3 months before we flew out. And to me, it's just, it's remarkable. I mean, this is one of, I think, the positive things of the pandemic, but we really learned how to develop relationships online. And this was really pre-pandemic. But we traveled and filmed with the families probably every couple of months over a 4-year journey. And this is the big commitment and challenge always with making a documentary is it's not scripted. So to see people grow and change and transform, which is really the idea in good storytelling, you have to spend some time immersed in that process. So, to see Ivy before she was 2 and, now she's 6.5, and Frederick, who started when we started, he was 4 and he's 9. And he was actually just in Salt Lake City for a screening, and we took him to a Utah Jazz game with his dad, and they stayed with me and my family here. Those are the relationships, really that we have. And I think I will forever, we call it film family, and I will be in these children's lives and in these families' lives forever. And we got very lucky, Hugh. We received an impact grant for the film. And when you do social impact with a film like this, the whole idea is a film is there to catalyze conversation like this and what you're really doing. And we really want to make sure that there is no shame, no blame for teachers and for parents. Teachers are heroic. They're always working so hard to do good things. They certainly don't go into the business for the, cash cow salary that they're making. And we really want the film to come into communities to create conversations so that communities can look at how they create change that is sustainable in their own schools, in their own districts, in their own states, in their own countries, right? We now have 42 policies that have been passed, 42 states that have passed science of reading policy in the United States, which is huge progress, right? But policy is only a law. And for a law to be effective, it has to be implemented well, and there has to be a lot of accountability. So, there's just lots that is there, but I continue to have a very close relationship with both families and Kareem.
Yeah, they're all inspirational, as well as you. Does anybody else want to join in with a question? Okay. I have another one.
Sure.
I'm a filmmaker as well, and it can be so challenging because you film so much, right? And then you have to select what to include and what to leave out. And I was curious to know if there was something or several things, footage or I don't know, maybe graphs or information that you left out that you wish you hadn't, that you would like to share with other people, what those were that yeah.
Well, if I turned my computer, I would show you my 20 terabyte hard drive. There is so much material there that was left on the cutting room floor, right? And it's this film, as I already mentioned, was a product of deep collaboration with so many people, and our editor was so good. And I'm just so proud of the work that she did. Her name is Chelsea Bullard, and she's in New York City. And I think probably, the hardest thing, and I don't like using the term because it's such a violent term, but they call it killing a darling. But we had many other subjects. We had many other families. We had really been working, before we found Kareem, we'd been working on the film for over a year, just doing investigative research, talking to families, looking at the issue and trying to understand early literacy, what set kids up for success, how we were teaching reading instruction in our country. And just, you know, it's a thesis when you're making a documentary like this, you're diving so deeply. So, you know, there were 3 other families that we followed. And those families that are in the film, the Hunters and the Adam Staples, just felt like the best fit with Kareem's civil rights journey. And that's why we chose them. So I think leaving the other families out after caring deeply about them and, you know, understanding their story was a hard decision to make.
I have a question.
Sorry, I have a question too. Go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you know, you touch on it and in the film, and I'm curious through the research process and also your discussions, the whole role of publishers, and you know how they may have influenced this whole gap between research and practice. And could you speak a little bit about that, because that's fascinating?
Well, I mean, in my humble opinion, if we had an ideal situation, really, this would not be a for-profit business. This would be open resources that shared the curricula that is the best curricula, and it would be open resources for teachers to access. So it's, you know, capitalism, right? And publishers are invested in getting curriculum out there that is going to do well and profit. So it's really, I mean, Kareem is very brave about calling out publishers and saying, shame on you. You know, this is quite criminal that there is not culpability in you as a giant for-profit company selling information that is actually not teaching our children to read. So he really does a good job, I think, calling that out and speaking truth to power. And it's, you know, it's really like, for lack of a better term, you know, it's sort of this good old boy network, right?
Yeah.
Where we have used the same old, and I mean, since I'm not sure if you're aware, but Lucy Calkins is no longer connected to the Columbia School of Education. So they have dissolved their relationship. The Columbia Teachers College, you know, has a reputation, you know, the Harvard School of Education, I mean, you know, top reputation in our country. And there have been so many articles now that have been written calling out balanced literacy, you know, calling out 3Qing as really something that is not teaching children appropriately to learn to read.
Interesting.
And I imagine that involving the publishers or someone like Lucy in the documentary must have been quite challenging for them to participate in.
Well, they didn't participate. It was really Kareem discussing them and going on. Kareem has several YouTube videos, many. I mean, he has many, you know, and he's quite active. And so he really is the one who called them out. But yes, I mean, you know, when you do something like this in a film, you really have to be confident about your own research and your thesis, and you have to be responsible about sharing the truth. And, you know, it requires, I think, a lot of work and background checking and fact checking and making sure that you are doing your due diligence as a storyteller.
Interesting. Hugh, you had a question?
Yeah, it's a kind of it's a question really about the bigger educational issues, Jenny. You know, so I really get the importance of early reading and the racial topography, you like, of the results of kids from different racial groups doing less well or better. You know, And that's obviously linked to social class and a whole range of other issues. But there is a broader context, which if you look at kids in Europe only start to learn to read at 7, most of them, and they do fine. Kids in the Waldorf system will only read sometimes when they're 10. And they absolutely do very, very well. So, that's very significant for an educator. So, the question is, what else is going on here? It doesn't detract from anything you saw or pointed to. But I just wondered if you had any insights into those other issues. Why does this become, such a crucial thing in the American context?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I don't know if I have an answer, but I think the challenge that we see in America is, 54% of adults in America are reading at a 6th grade level or below. You look at the prison population, it's something like 68% of the prison population is reading below a 3rd grade level. Even if you look at our high school graduation rates, and I can't remember exactly what that percentage is, but really our high school graduates, the level that they are reading at is very, very, very low overall. It's just a concern. So I think if you take a country and, you look at England, you look at other places where kids are learning to read later, even at 7 or 10, they're learning to read. And I think they're learning to read probably because they are immersed in evidence-based reading instruction that is explicit, where there is scaffolding, there's lots of repetition. And I think what happens, at least in our school systems, is if you really don't have that kind of curricula that is used and that is followed through even at older, grades, then those kids are going to continuously be left way behind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was struck by, maybe Hugh wanted to respond, sorry, but I was struck by Kareem positioning literacy really as a gateway. He mentioned gateway several times. He mentioned really, it is fundamental because it opens up other literacies. And he spoke about that in a very compelling way. But there is this debate. It's interesting. There's this debate internationally whether there might be too much of a focus sometimes on certain, you call the core curriculum. It kind of gets caught up again in the politics of education and the basics, going back to the basics, and whether perhaps maybe to Hugh's point, but perhaps, how does this debate translate into other contexts where there's other needs are sometimes so basic and different that this focus on maybe an academic concept of reading or measuring reading and in tests and such becomes irrelevant. I don't know, Hugh, if you wanted to comment on that.
No, look, it's I don't want to detract in any way from the insights that the film has, but these two films together, I don't know if you've seen the other one, Jenny.
No, but I really want to. How can I see it?
You really need to.
We'll send it to you.
Will you send it to me? I would love that.
The two of them together really almost, in a sense, present two opposite poles in this debate, right? Because here you have kids in a forest, in a pygmy community, where there's no school, learning to read. And if you look at the community, there's such enormous skills in a whole range of things, and they're trying to learn to read and codify their reading, and they do the phonics stuff. It seems
they do.
Science of reading, yes.
Yes, they absolutely do. But it's in a way, it's so out of place in their, in the forest for what they need to learn to survive. And it's very clear that they're learning all of these other skills, none of which are valued. And I just wonder, in a way, and that's what struck me. I think the kids that learn to read later, it's not as if they're having no education. There's often a very rich education experience, and it's often a very, very affirming one. One where they really don't feel inadequate in any way because they can't read, right? But they're doing a whole range of other fantastic things that they receive credit for, that they build confidence on, that they kind of hone their cognitive skills on. And when it comes to learn to reading, they have a predisposition to, yeah, I can do something, I can learn this, I've got the confidence to do it. So there isn't a sense where, oh, this is a struggling kids and none of the kids can learn to read. There seems to be, in a way, such, you start with such deficits in a situation like that. There's the struggle, the standards low, and everyone's struggling. And I just wonder often whether there isn't a sense that we're missing out on a lot of the other strong, wonderful things that are there. If you look at those families, there's such beauty and learning in all of those relationships, right? In what they're doing, from how the waters, watch the water boil. The mom just these wonderfully instinctive ways of teaching kids about things. And so anyway, so that's the one thing. But the point I really want to make, I think, is how this plays out internationally, is that because there is a problem with reading, the focus then for education gets reduced just to learning to read. This is less of an issue, I think, in the US when you've got everything else, but in a place like Africa, when a lot of other things are needed, when you just focus on the reading, it becomes a very narrow idea of what education is all about. And if it's only the drill part that you get, because if you think about it, if you're sitting in a very poor school, sometimes even just a wooden shack or a tin shack, and all you're doing is drilling, and nothing else of what you do is affirmed in any way, education becomes a weird thing, in that context. So I think that's partly the problem, is that the reading issue and the reading crisis, as it's called, particularly by the World Bank, is linked so much to how they fund and what they fund. And often they end up just funding those elements in the education system to the neglect of so much else. So I think the pushback, particularly in the Global South, against the narrow literacy and numeracy debate is actually, well, there is so much else to affirm, and it's about building a whole education system that can function in a way, not just about doing a literacy campaign to improve literacy. So I think that's slightly different, and that's why it was so nice to see your film. That's different from the actual cognitive science questions of how kids learn to read, because that's a broader question of how education is funded, what's not funded, what other things are not affirmed in the education system. But anyway, I just wondered what insights you had into that debate from the work that you did in the movie.
No, it's a fascinating discussion. I mean, I think it's so nuanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's simple. And I think, we know that kids have to learn to read to learn. So, you have to figure out a way for that to happen. Affirmation, family, poverty, trauma, challenges, all of those things are impacting a family, impacting an individual child, impacting a community. So those things are just, it's complicated. And I don't think any of this is simple. And sometimes that affirmation, that sort of feeling that comes from an individual teacher, from a leadership style that trickles down then to teachers within that community. I mean, that really comes from, I think, strong leadership, training, understanding how to work with kids, that this is not about crowd management. This is about relationship building and sharing skills and lessons and ways that children view the world. But I do think, at least for us in the United States, we are in a situation right now where if the key idea to function in the United States and in a country that is democratic and votes, and you do not have that skill of literacy that is so foundational. And, drilling and skilling, when it is done well with affirmation by teachers who are great, it is joyous. It is joyous. We were just in Little Rock, Arkansas for an activation with the film, and we got to see the marvelous Miss Marbley teaching first grade and teaching a decoding lesson. And, it was magic. Like you could hear a pin drop, the way the children were interacting and so happy and so excited. And, so really so much of this, I think, is thinking about, how we really are training and working with principals, with school boards, with superintendents to work effectively with teachers as individuals, as they are working with children and families. And now in our country, so many parents have their own literacy struggles that they don't often value it because they're afraid, they don't know, they've been cut off. And, so it's just, it's very nuanced.
Yeah, Melissa in your film is quite a character. She's I found her to be very Belinda, excuse me.
Belinda, that's okay.
She was very inspiring. She's very matter of fact and really bright, but also very committed to what she was doing. I was struck how she had to in the early stages really invent her own curriculum because she realized that her curriculum that she had was not working. But
you're talking about Sabrina Causey.
Sabrina Causey. Oh, excuse me.
Sorry. No. Belinda is the mom and Sabrina is the teacher. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But that teacher was very inspiring. And I guess my point to Hugh's point, we're also cognizant of time that we've gone over and promised it'd only be a half hour with you. So you're being generous. Thank you so much.
No problem.
My point is maybe it has to do with how the teacher envisions also literacy, what the purpose of education is, and learning to read is, and that comes out in your film, I think, as well. That commitment and that broader vision. They're not just doing a mechanical task because they have to do it. These teachers that you feature, as you say, they're leaders. They're inspirational. They have a broader vision of why they're doing this that I think is touching. Both Adriana and I cried at the end of the movie. Yeah, but
that's several points actually, man.
We showed two films on literacy. Actually, I don't know if you've heard of the Literacy Project by Catherine Murphy.
No, I'd love to see that too.
She was going to join us today, but I don't see.
Yeah, so
she would like to.
We saw the context of literacy campaigns in Latin America and in Cuba and in Brazil, and they're really working off of this idea of Freire that literacy is about learning to read the world as well. It's not just the word; it's about learning to read the world, and it connects very well with Kareem's also idea that it's kind of a portal into a broader set of capabilities and rights and such.
And politically, to be able to be part of a wider culture,
it's connected to politics. Yeah,
absolutely.
See that also in Makongo.
Yeah. So
thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you.
My pleasure. So nice talking with you.
What do you, before you let you go, we're curious what your next project might be, because now we're hooked on your
you may not want to reveal
your programs. Oh, it's a secret?
No, I don't know. I want to know.
Oh, you're funny. I'm actually not really working on a giant new project yet because we've been so busy with our social impact campaign.
Yeah.
And, this is really like, it's the right to read has truly been a part of a movement, at least in our country, really understanding literacy as our greatest civil right. And I think, it's been just wonderful to see the work that it's doing and the conversations that it's creating. But I know that that next film will come to me when I am
It'll come to you.
rested.
It'll
and
choose
ready.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mary.
It's been wonderful to meet you. And
Good
Nice
luck.
to meet you both. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
you.
you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks, everyone.